Hello, part B. I was not able to get all that in 15 minutes. So here's our second part of our notes for ecology part one. So the last slide that we were on were my trophic levels. All right, my primary producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. One thing that we do need to point out is that if one level of this food chain and food web is removed, it can affect all of the other organisms, especially my autotrophs. They're the key to this. Imagine if all of my producers were just suddenly gone. My primary consumers would have nothing to eat, and then they would die. If they died, my secondary consumers wouldn't have anything to eat, and so on and so forth. So my autotrophs are kind of the key point to thriving this whole ecosystem food web, all of my trophic levels. Let's talk about what these decomposers are doing for a second. So my decomposers, when organisms die, decomposers like fungi, mold, and bacteria, they're breaking down those dead organisms. And when they do that, this adds nutrients to the soil. Well, when they add those nutrients to the soil, it helps those plants grow and survive. And as I just said, once those plants are growing and surviving, they're kind of the start of this whole process. So decomposers are just as important as any other step. A keystone species is a species that the ecosystem depends on greatly. And if this species was removed, the ecosystem would change drastically. Kind of like those autotrophs and those decomposers I just mentioned. But an example of something, a consumer that's a keystone species, are sea otters. Aren't they cute? Sea otters, why are they so important? Sea otters eat sea urchins, okay? If otters were to disappear, there would be an abundance of those sea urchins. Those sea urchins, these purple things in the picture, eat kelp, which is a type of plant. All right, so imagine if the otters were gone, there would be a lot of sea urchins, and those sea urchins would overeat this kelp. If all that kelp is gone, then the aquatic ecosystem, they wouldn't have as much oxygen, they wouldn't have as much food and resources for other fish and critters in the sea. So this is just an example of an ecosystem with sea otters and one without, and you can clearly see how this one species is affecting all of these other things. All right, next topic. Bioaccumulation, biomagnification. They mean the same thing. Let's look at these words for a second. So bio meaning living, accumulation meaning getting larger, magnification, again, getting larger. Okay, so this is a buildup of toxic substances in an organism. So buildup, we're getting larger here. As it goes up the trophic levels, if there's any toxins towards the beginning of this line, and if it goes up the trophic levels, that amount of toxins is going to increase. This is very common in aquatic environments. So why is this? Because pollutants from the land, they end up in the water. The bottom feeders in the water eat those pollutants. And imagine those small critters that eat those bottom feeders, they have this toxin inside of them, right? Well, their predators are going to eat those, therefore they have all the toxins that they had. And this guy is going to come along and eat that, and now this has the toxins from this animal and from this animal. And imagine if we eat some fish that had those toxins in it, by the time it gets to us, we now have the toxins of everything that organism ate and prior to that, so it's very harmful. Have you ever heard of how pregnant women shouldn't really eat seafood? It's because of this reason. It's just an additional risk whenever you eat seafood. Now, most of the cases, they make sure it's clean and toxic free, but again, it's just a risk that pregnant women shouldn't really take. This is just another example of this biomagnification. So I have some toxins up here, and as it goes up the trophic levels, by the time it gets to one of my later consumers, it now has all of the toxins for all of these guys. So it's just adding on and on and on and on. So biomagnification. Biomass. We know that mass is the amount of matter, right? So biomass is the amount of living matter. This is the total mass of the organic matter at each trophic level, and the total of that is called biomass. Biomass is just another term for potential energy, energy that is to be eaten and used later on. The transfer of energy from one level to another is very ineffective. About only 10% of that energy goes on. So we're not talking about toxins anymore. We're just talking about energy. Okay, so the sun gives all these micro critters their energy, which they need to use that energy, right? And their consumers are only getting a little bit of their energy. These fish are getting 10% of these guys. This larger fish is only getting 10% of what they had, and we are only getting 10% of this organism's energy. We can easily see this trend in these things called ecological pyramids. So this just shows a relationship between my consumers and my producers at different trophic levels. And that shows the amounts of energy and the amounts of biomass contained at each trophic level. So my producers, they obviously have the most amount of energy, right, from the sun. As it goes up these trophic levels, my amount of energy simply gets lower and lower. Remember, only 10% goes up onto these trophic levels. Here's another type of ecological pyramid that might look like this. So again, it's just the amount of energy that's going up the trophic levels. So I can ask you questions like this. So which level has the most energy? I would say primary producers. Which level has the most organisms? Again, I can see through this ecological pyramid that my primary producers, they have the most organisms. Which level has the least organisms? Based on this, my tertiary consumers have the least amount of organisms. And that makes sense, right? I don't want as many tertiary consumers as I do my producers, or else that's not going to be very even. Which level has the least amount of energy? My tertiary consumers do. And that is the end of our part 1 ecology notes. All right? Email me if any of these topics you didn't understand, and try to be specific, such as I don't get this particular word or this topic or even a slide number if you're looking at the PowerPoint itself. All right? Talk to you later.